April the 29th, 2017, Beverly Road, Hull. A tense summer afternoon hid the final spark of a neighborhood feud that had spiraled far beyond angry words. Residents watched as two women, once just familiar faces on the street, clashed in a confrontation that would mark the beginning of a deadly chain of events. Angela Burkitt, who styled herself as the Queen of Beverly Road, had long projected volatility and intimidation, yet now she stood on the brink of an irreversible act. How could a dispute between neighbors erupt into a killing that stunned an entire community? This was not a moment of blind impulse, but revenge fueled by humiliation earlier that same day. Inside West Yorkshire Wakefield's most notorious woman, full list of female criminals and life sentences. Welcome to UK Real Crime, where West Yorkshire's streets whisper the secrets of those who walked them, and the women behind its darkest cases are finally unmasked. Today, we revisit the events that transformed a long-standing feud into a fatal encounter, exposing every step that led from confrontation to conviction. What you're about to hear may stay with you long after the story ends. First offender, Angela Burkitt. June the 29th, 2017, Beverly Road, Hull. A simmering neighborhood feud erupted into sudden violence, exposing long-standing hostility hidden behind the familiar routines of daily life. Angela Burkitt, aged 52, lived on Beverly Road in Hull and was known locally for aggressive behavior. She often referred to herself as the Queen of Beverly Road. Her neighbor, 39-year-old Joanne Hemingway, had endured repeated conflict with her, a persistent bullying. Earlier tensions between the two women had created an unstable dynamic on their street. Ms. Hemingway, a beloved daughter, sister and mother, became the focus of Burkitt's anger on the day the long-running animosity reached its deadly climax. On June the 29th, 2017, the women argued publicly on their street, a confrontation witnessed by neighbors. During this exchange, Ms. Hemingway managed to overpower Burkitt physically. Burkitt lost, and it made her feel deeply humiliated. Hours later, Burkitt's anger escalated into a desire for retaliation. She armed herself with a knife, while her partner, Glenn Foster, carried additional weapons. Later that day, the confrontation resumed outside their homes. Miss Hemingway approached carrying a scaffolding pole, while Burkitt advanced with a knife, and Foster remained nearby, holding a baseball bat and another blade. As voices rose, CCTV captured Burkitt stepping forward and driving the knife once into Miss Hemingway's chest, with such force that the handle snapped off. The wound caused catastrophic internal bleeding. Miss Hemingway attempted to move away, but collapsed soon after. Witnesses reported hearing shouting and Burkitt telling Foster, "Eddie, I've killed her." Once Miss Hemingway fell, Burkitt did nothing to assist her. Instead, she attempted to shift blame onto Foster and later tried to intimidate witnesses. Emergency services arrived quickly, but despite medical intervention, Miss Hemingway died 2 hours later. Police secured the scene, gathered accounts, and took Burkitt into custody. Humberside Police's major crime team conducted a wide-ranging investigation. CCTV footage offered a clear sequence of events, while witness statements reinforced the visual evidence. Forensic examination confirmed the broken knife handle corresponded with the blade embedded in the victim. Initially, Foster was arrested, but further analysis clarified that Burkitt alone had delivered the stab wound. The prosecution presented a consistent timeline supported by physical evidence, video analysis, and testimony from residents. This collective material removed any doubt regarding Burkitt's role and led to her being formally charged with murder. At Hull Crown Court, Burkitt was convicted of murder and witness intimidation after a 7-day trial. The judge condemned the act as a revenge-driven killing and described her behavior as deeply unpleasant. She received a mandatory life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years. Burkitt served her sentence at HMP New Hall near Wakefield, where she worked as a cleaner. In April 2020, she contracted COVID-19. Underlying conditions including COPD and hepatitis C worsened her prognosis. A prison ombudsman review later criticized the facility for not isolating her sooner. She died on April 17, 2020. Ms. Hemingway's family expressed profound grief, describing her as irreplaceable and thanking investigators for ensuring justice was delivered. Before we close, cases like this offer sobering reminders. First, escalating neighbor disputes should never be ignored. Intervention can prevent tragedy. Second, patterns of intimidation often signal future violence. Third, community reporting is powerful. Clear evidence from witnesses was decisive here. And ultimately, a single moment of unchecked rage can redraw the line between conflict and catastrophe, but never undo its consequences. Second offender, Chelsea Standage. November the 13th, 2021. Horbury, West Yorkshire. A night of celebration turned into tragedy when a single decision behind the wheel spiraled into devastation that no one inside the car could escape. Chelsea Standage, aged 20, lived on Barden Road in Wakefield and regularly socialized with a small group of friends, including her boyfriend, 20-year-old Elliot Lem. She offered to drive the group home after an evening of drinking and drug use. Elliot, seated beside her, had an affectionate but volatile relationship with Standage. The others in the vehicle relied on her to get them home safely. Specifically, during the evening of November the 12th, 2021, Standage consumed a significant quantity of alcohol, including cider, beer, spirits, and Jaeger bombs, and also used cocaine. In the early hours of the following morning, she took the wheel of her Vauxhall Corsa. As the group traveled along Wakefield Road, her speed continued to rise. Passengers grew visibly frightened, urging her to slow down as she accelerated well beyond the 30-mile-per-hour limit. Standage dismissed their concerns with laughter and expletives, continuing to drive dangerously. Shortly before the collision, Snapchat footage recorded inside the car captured the escalating danger. A female passenger cried and repeatedly begged Standage to reduce her speed. Standage, laughing, responded with, "Fuck off," adding, "I'm only doing 80, despite the residential road's 30-mile-per-hour limit." Moments later, as the car approached a bend at more than 70 miles per hour, Standage lost control. The Corsa left its lane, struck a wall with immense force and collided with a parked vehicle. The impact crushed the passenger side, where Elliot was seated. Emergency services arrived quickly, but Elliot had suffered catastrophic chest injuries and could not be saved. 2 other passengers sustained serious, life-altering injuries. Standage survived the crash. While Standage was treated for injuries in the hospital and toxicology testing, while the major collision inquiry team led the investigation, they then secured the scene and interviewed surviving passengers. Officers analyzed road markings, vehicle damage, and the car's resting position to reconstruct Standage's speed and loss of control. Snapchat recordings provided real-time evidence of the driving behavior and the passenger's fear. Toxicology reports confirmed her impairment, and blood alcohol readings of 63 micrograms per 100 milliliters supported the conclusion of dangerous driving. Statements from the injured passengers aligned with the digital footage, establishing prolonged recklessness prior to the crash. The combined forensic, digital, and medical findings left no doubt as to Standage's role in causing Elliot's death and the others' injuries. At Leeds Crown Court, Standage pleaded guilty to causing death by dangerous driving and 2 counts of causing serious injury by dangerous driving. The judge described her actions as a deliberate disregard for safety and imposed a sentence of 8 years and 8 months, requiring her to serve at least 2/3. As Elliot's death became known, Standage offered no apology to his family. Elliot's family expressed profound devastation, condemning Standage's lack of remorse and vowing that no sentence could reflect the depth of their loss. In moments where recklessness overtakes responsibility, the consequences ripple far beyond the driver's seat, reshaping countless lives forever. Third offender, Hollie Hanson. September the 2nd, 2024, Nottingley, West Yorkshire. What appeared online as affection concealed a far darker reality, one revealed only when escalating control finally erupted into violence. Hollie Hanson, aged 26 and living at Low Cross Court in Nottingley, a dangerous individual capable of extreme domestic violence. Despite her cheerful TikTok presence, where she portrayed a loving partnership to more than 25,000 followers, she was secretly subjecting her girlfriend to prolonged coercion. The victim, whose identity is protected, had been in a 4-year relationship with Hanson and endured isolation, intimidation, and repeated assaults, while a male friend later became a secondary victim during one of Hanson's attacks. Throughout their 4-year relationship, Hanson exercised significant control over her partner's daily life. She prevented her from owning a mobile phone, monitored her location, restricted social contact, and reacted violently to perceived challenges. On one earlier occasion, she struck the victim on the head with a vodka bottle, causing injuries as wounding with intent. Despite the outward appearance of a stable relationship on social media, privately the victim lived under sustained coercive behavior that gradually escalated. In the early hours of September the 2nd, 2024, Hanson and the victim returned home after socializing with friends. Hanson became jealous and verbally abusive toward her partner. When the victim went to Hanson's home to collect belongings, Hanson followed, pushed her onto the bed, and gripped her by the throat for several minutes while Hanson repeatedly threatened to kill her. The victim struggled for breath and believed she would die. A male friend, concerned for the victim's safety, entered the room to intervene. Hanson immediately turned on him, grabbing him by the neck using his chain and forcing him backwards. The sustained attack created significant fear and demonstrated Hanson's willingness to use violence against anyone who attempted to help her partner. The victim fled and later reported the attack. During further safeguarding inquiries, she disclosed the wider history of coercion, isolation, and earlier physical violence. Police arrested Hanson on September 18, 2024, and she was charged the following day. The investigation was led by Detective Constable Demi Stubbs of the Wakefield District Adult Safeguarding Unit. Initial inquiries into the strangulation incident expanded when the victim revealed years of coercive control, including restrictions on communication, monitoring through location checks, and forced isolation from friends and family. Officers documented the previous assault involving the vodka bottle, which aligned with medical evidence of head injuries. Statements from the male friend corroborated the violence of the September attack. Police examined Hanson's social media, contrasting her curated public image with the victim's disclosures. Hanson pleaded guilty, and safeguarding officers supported the victim throughout the court process. At Leeds Crown Court, Hanson was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, followed by a 3-year extended license due to the danger she posed. An indefinite restraining order was imposed to protect the victim. The judge highlighted the prolonged coercion and serious violence as clear indicators of significant risk. The victim allowed her story to be publicized, hoping increased awareness would encourage LGBTQ+ domestic abuse survivors to seek help without fear. This case shows how hidden abuse can thrive behind curated appearances, revealing its reality only when escape depends on speaking out. Fourth offender, Lisa Ellwood. August 29, 2023, Wakefield, West Yorkshire. A birthday celebration dissolved into violence inside a quiet flat, exposing a marriage long troubled by fear, alcohol, and simmering resentment. Lisa Ellwood, aged 40, had moved from Ireland to Wakefield in 2019 to live with her husband, 42-year-old Ryan Ellwood. Behind the walls of their home, the marriage was marked by escalating confrontations, jealousy, and heavy drinking. Although Lisa sought to portray herself as a battered wife, but it turned out that she frequently initiated violence during their rows. She lived with complex PTSD, a personality disorder, and alcoholism she described as functional. Ryan, once outgoing and close to his family, had become increasingly withdrawn as tensions between them intensified. The pair's relationship had long been strained by alcohol-fueled arguments. Lisa regularly concealed spirits in coffee cups and drank heavily throughout the day. Friends and witnesses recalled occasions where she publicly lashed out at Ryan, countering her later claims that she was solely a victim. Their marriage became an exhausting cycle of jealousy, accusations, and late-night rows, each louder than the last. As her birthday approached in late August, the couple planned a night out, but underlying tensions remained unresolved. On the evening of August 29, 2023, the couple celebrated Lisa's birthday at the Blind Pig pub. She consumed 6 cocktails containing vodka, gin, tequila, and other spirits. The drinking soon triggered arguments that continued as they left the city centre. CCTV captured Lisa stumbling near their home in Greenwood Court, arriving moments before Ryan. When he entered the kitchen, the row reignited. At some point, Lisa reached for a kitchen knife. She pressed her arm across Ryan's chest, pinning him briefly against the cabinets, then drove the blade into his chest, with enough force to fracture a rib and pierce his lung and aorta. Within minutes, she dialed 999, claiming she had found him already injured. Paramedics arrived, but Ryan was pronounced dead at 11:45 that night. Lisa was arrested shortly after police arrived at the scene. During interviews, she insisted she remembered nothing, blaming alcohol, fear, and trauma. She maintained that someone else must have inflicted the wound, repeating this narrative throughout her trial. She went further, suggesting her daughter could be responsible. However, forensic findings and witness accounts steadily dismantled her claims, revealing a pattern of previous aggression inconsistent with her defense. The homicide and major inquiry team led the investigation. A post-mortem confirmed Ryan died from a single stab wound delivered with considerable force. CCTV traced the couple's movements from the pub to their home, supporting the timeline of the argument. Officers uncovered Lisa's false statements during the 999 call and gathered testimonies from neighbors and acquaintances who had witnessed her attacking Ryan in previous months. The team also examined the couple's troubled history, including Lisa's concealed drinking habits and documented violence. Detective Inspector Phil Hughes later said the jury saw through her attempts to mislead, concluding she alone inflicted the fatal injury. The evidence formed a clear narrative of a marriage strained by alcohol, volatility, and escalating aggression. At Leeds Crown Court, Lisa Ellwood was unanimously convicted of murder with a minimum term of 16 years, citing her intoxication, prior violence, and attempts to deflect blame onto her daughter. Her defense of being a battered wife was rejected as inconsistent with the evidence. Ryan's family described their grief as overwhelming, saying they had watched him fade under the strain of the relationship long before his death. This case reveals how hidden violence can escalate behind closed doors until one final argument removes any chance of return. Fifth offender, Rebecca Rogers. April the 10th, 2020, Wakefield, West Yorkshire. A knock at the door became the beginning of a quiet betrayal, carried out against a man unable to see the danger entering his home. Rebecca Rogers, aged 29, lived in Barnsley and struggled with drug addiction throughout early 2020. Her dependency drove her into increasingly desperate behavior. The victim she targeted was a 92-year-old widower, registered blind and living alone while self-isolating during the first weeks of the COVID-19 pandemic. He relied heavily on routine, carers, and the security of his home. With no connection to Rogers, he was simply a vulnerable man attempting to protect himself from a deadly virus. That isolation made him an easy target for her sudden, opportunistic intrusion. On the morning of April the 10th, the victim was strictly isolating due to his age and fragile health. Rogers, seeking money to fund her addiction, deliberately targeted him, knowing he was alone. Shortly before 11 o'clock, she approached his Wakefield home. When he explained he could not let her in because he was shielding, she replied, "Well, I'm coming in," and forced her way inside, pushing the 92-year-old backwards into his conservatory. Once inside, she quickly searched the property, ignoring his pleas for her to stop. She stole his wallet, a £10 note intended for his carer, and £100 kept in a shoebox. She then smashed several ornamental plates belonging to his late wife, items of deep sentimental value. As she fled, she shoved him to the floor, causing him to hit his head. Alarmed neighbors heard a massive crash and called police. Rogers was located nearby and arrested shortly afterward. The investigation progressed swiftly. Neighbors identified Rogers' voice during the disturbance, placing her at the scene. The victim provided a clear account of the forced entry, the theft, the destruction of his wife's ornaments, and the assault as she left. Officers confirmed Rogers had been seeking money to support her drug dependency. The victim described the emotional impact of losing items tied to his late wife and the fear of being overpowered in his own home while already vulnerable. With consistent neighbor testimony, the victim's detailed statement, and her quick arrest, the evidence formed a straightforward case. Rogers offered no viable defense and entered a guilty plea. At Leeds Crown Court, Rogers pleaded guilty to robbery. The judge described the offense as particularly mean and unpleasant, emphasizing her exploitation of a blind, elderly man during a public health crisis. She was sentenced to 5 years and 7 months imprisonment, reflecting the grave aggravating factors and breach of moral duty. As for residents, they expressed shock that anyone would exploit a shielding pensioner, calling the act cruel and deeply unsettling during an already frightening time. The case shows how vulnerability, isolation, and desperation can intersect with devastating consequences when compassion is replaced by addiction-driven opportunism. Sixth offender, Karen Cosford. October the 8th, 2012, Wakefield, West Yorkshire. Behind the walls of one of Britain's most secure prisons, a forbidden relationship unfolded, one that would ultimately shatter careers, expose corruption, and shock the public. The offender at the center of this case is Karen Cosford, a 47-year-old prison nurse from Normanton. The man involved was Brian McBride, a convicted rapist serving a life sentence inside high-security Wakefield prison. Although McBride was not a victim in the conventional sense, he was the inmate with whom Cosford engaged in a relationship that breached the fundamental rules governing staff conduct. The true victim, legally and ethically, was the integrity of the prison system itself. Over several months, Cosford developed an improper and eventually sexual relationship with McBride. She sent him intimate text messages on a smuggled mobile phone, telling him he was dead sexy and declaring her love. She wrote him a handwritten love letter, calling him her knight in shining armor. She hid it inside a jar of sugar in McBride's cell. During one incident, she performed a sex act on him, while 2 colleagues, Carolyn Falloon and Jacqueline Flynn, stood guard outside his cell. On another occasion, Falloon witnessed the pair having sex in the medical unit and still failed to report it. A third colleague, Kevin Wilson, also helped conceal the misconduct by not reporting the mobile phone and providing McBride with a SIM card. The affair came to light when McBride's cell was searched, and he disclosed the relationship to Cosford's husband, himself a prison officer. An immediate internal investigation happened. Although the sources do not specify the exact date of Cosford's arrest, the misconduct inquiry intensified quickly once the hidden letter, text messages, and contraband phone were recovered. Prosecutors later described the evidence as clear and consistent. During the 4-week trial, Cosford claimed she had been raped, bribed, and intimidated by McBride, alleging he threatened to kill her and her family. However, the jury rejected these claims, concluding that she had willingly engaged in the relationship. She was found guilty on October 4, 2012, at Leeds Crown Court. Days later, on October 8, 2012, she was sentenced at Bradford Crown Court to 3 years in prison for misconduct in public office. Her 3 colleagues received sentences ranging from 15 to 21 months for helping to conceal the affair. The prison service issued a sharp public response, stressing that the vast majority of staff are honest and hard-working, but confirming that there is no place for corrupt members of staff in the system. Media coverage, renewed conversations about manipulation within prisons, staff training, and systemic vulnerabilities, although no major social upheaval followed. This case remains a sobering reminder. Even in the most controlled environments, human boundaries can falter, and when they do, the consequences reach far beyond 2 people. 7th offender, Sharon Eyre. November 10, 2015, Leeds, West Yorkshire. Inside a small family business, a betrayal quietly unfolded behind balance sheets, concealed beneath years of trust and routine. Sharon Eyre, aged 52, was a self-employed bookkeeper and award-winning accountant based in West Breton, Wakefield. Employed part-time from 2007 by Tropicana Interior Landscaping, she worked closely with its owner, Sue Graham, and soon became a trusted figure within the firm. Their professional relationship developed into personal familiarity, with Mrs. Graham believing Eyre to be a friend. From May 2007, Eyre handled Tropicana's accounts, payments, and financial records. With minimal oversight, she gained full access to banking systems and invoicing. By 2011, she knew the business faced financial pressure, yet began inserting irregular transactions disguised within routine paperwork. Across 5 years, she executed a fraud totaling £98,992. She wrote 29 company checks payable to herself and duplicated supplier invoices, directing the second payment into her own account. As losses accumulated, the company struggled with HMRC warnings and bailiff communications. Staff went without wage reviews, and owner Sue Graham had to sell jewelry, release pension funds, and dispose of company vehicles to keep the business afloat. Despite witnessing these impacts, Eyre continued her scheme, shielded by her control over financial reconciliation. Irregularities in payment records emerged in early 2015, prompting an internal review. Once Eyre's access was removed, a full audit exposed the scale of the theft, revealing that the company's survival had come at significant personal cost to its owner. A forensic investigation confirmed that nearly £100,000 had been diverted into Eyre's accounts. Police traced check sequences, transfers, and duplicate invoices, establishing deliberate manipulation rather than error. A search of her Wakefield home uncovered luxury goods inconsistent with her income. Statements from Sue Graham detailed the operational and personal strain caused during the fraud period, reinforcing the conclusion of sustained, calculated dishonesty. Faced with comprehensive evidence, Eyre pleaded guilty, acknowledging her prolonged breach of trust. At Leeds Crown Court, Eyre admitted fraud and was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. The judge emphasized her sustained abuse of trust, the financial jeopardy caused to a small employer, and the personal sacrifices forced upon Mrs. Graham. The court rejected financial pressure as justification for long-term calculated dishonesty. Sue Graham described feeling totally and utterly betrayed, saying the fraud inflicted emotional and financial damage far beyond the missing money. The case shows how hidden dishonesty within trusted roles can devastate lives long before the truth finally emerges. Final offender, Jade Moore. January the 23rd, 2024, Leeds, West Yorkshire. A pattern of small but relentless offences forced authorities to intervene with measures rarely used against routine retail crime. Jade Moore, aged 38 and of no fixed address, became known throughout the Wakefield Metropolitan District for persistent shoplifting that repeatedly affected retailers in Hemsworth, South Elmsall, and Ackworth. Her actions caused financial loss and increased strain on shop staff, who regularly faced her disruptive behavior. From 2023 onward, incident reports showed a consistent pattern. Moore entered stores, stole goods, and ignored requests to leave. 7 premises were repeatedly targeted: Aldi, Asda, Iceland, B&M, Home Bargains, Today's Store, and Ackworth Service Station. As the pattern escalated, Wakefield Council and West Yorkshire Police jointly assessed the impact and identified the need for a criminal behaviour order, a measure used when repeated misconduct continues despite earlier interventions. Months of coordinated evidence gathering followed. Retailers submitted statements documenting frequent thefts and the toll on staff confidence. Police compiled incident logs and footage capturing Moore's refusal to comply with instructions. Investigators concluded that the cumulative disruption warranted formal restrictions to protect businesses and reduce ongoing stress for workers. This evidence formed the basis of the application presented to Leeds Magistrates Court. At Leeds Magistrates Court, Moore received a 32-week prison sentence. In addition, a 2-year criminal behaviour order was imposed, prohibiting her from entering the 7 affected stores and requiring her to leave any retail premises in the Wakefield district when instructed. The order remains in force until January 22, 2026. Magistrates determined that combined custodial and behavioural measures were necessary to curb her persistent offending and safeguard local retailers. Local authorities welcomed the decision, noting that even low-level offences, when repeated over time, can significantly damage communities and will be addressed with firm action when their impact becomes substantial. As with all cases involving repeated low-level crime, Moore's story serves as a caution regarding vulnerability and prevention. While the harm was economic rather than violent, the consequences for local businesses were tangible. And for communities, persistent offending acts like a slow erosion of trust. To prevent similar situations, 3 key points are clear. First, retailers should report all incidents promptly to establish enforceable patterns. Second, communities must recognize that repeated low-level crime can escalate without early intervention. Third, individuals in crisis should seek support services before circumstances deteriorate into criminal behavior. In the end, this case shows how even small, repeated acts can reshape the safety and stability of an entire district, and how accountability, though delayed, always finds its way forward. And as this case closes, one question still lingers: how many more hidden stories lie behind the everyday streets we think we know so well? If you want to be the first to uncover the next real crime buried beneath the surface of the UK, make sure you subscribe to UK Real Crime and hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Your engagement shapes this channel, so tell us, which case, which town, which criminal mind should we investigate next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and your idea might just become our next deep dive. Until then, stay curious, because in the world of real crime, nothing is ever as ordinary as it seems.